Hey guys, welcome back. This is Neon. I'm going to talk a little bit about comic books. I haven't talked about comics in several weeks. We haven't really talked much about comics here on CLOWNFISH TV. There's been a lot of other things going on with pop culture, and the reason we haven't really covered comics is, personally, I think the mainstream comic book industry is basically dead. I think it's the direct market anyway, I think is basically dead, and it's sort of like the movie DOA, where the poison has been introduced already. Dennis Quaid is basically dead. He's just trying to figure out who his killer is. And the mainstream comic book industry, the direct market, is effectively dead. I think comic shops are closing at a shocking rate. And DC Comics, just last week, now I was out of town when all this went down, but DC announced that they are going to be cutting back on the number of books they're going to publish in the direct market. We're talking like 10 to 15%, of 10 to 15% cut. Basically, Dan DiDio is saying that, you know, the market can't bear that many comic books, and there are a lot of comics out there, but it's very top heavy. We have, like, you know, the top 10 books seemingly making up a good chunk of the sales, you know, whatever the event titles are or whatnot. And I think their logic is basically, if we cut the number of titles, then people are going to buy, they're going to buy the books that are on the shelves. You know, we might move more issues of Batman if we cut some of the C-list and D-list characters. And I think that's really erroneous thinking. I don't think that's actually going to happen, because people buy what they like, right? And if somebody doesn't, you know, like Batman, for whatever reason they don't like Batman, then they're not going to buy Batman. If they liked a book that got canceled, I don't think they're going to pick another book up to replace it. I think they're just not going to buy any more comics. So I personally do not think this is actually going to work. But now we're starting to see what the thought process might actually be here. And I think, personally, I think DC has an exit strategy to jump ship from the failing direct market, from comic book shops entirely. I really think that DC is going to put its eggs in a different basket, and they're going to go for the digest size comics that are going to be available everywhere. Now, we did review a couple months ago, I actually was able to track down some of these 100-page giants, and I liked them. I thought it was a really good deal. It was, you know, $5 for 100 pages of material. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of new stuff. There was, like, you know, 12 pages or 20 pages or whatever of new material, and it was mostly reprints. But I think that they were just testing the waters to see if they could go back to selling comic books at a reasonable price in locations where, you know, they haven't sold comics in many years. And they started with Walmart. They made the books Walmart exclusive. Now, this is kind of a problem, though, because Walmart doesn't really seem to, they don't seem to really care about comics. We've had a hard time finding these books because they're literally in a little tiny box over either in the toy department, or they stick them over by, like, the trading cards and stuff. They don't make a big deal about it. It's not like, you know, when I was a kid, I remember you could find, you know, comics on the spinner rack. They were sort of in their own little section, or you could buy the Archie comics in the checkout line. You couldn't miss them. The way that DC is doing them at Walmart, or has been doing them at Walmart rather, is you blink, you miss them. You definitely can miss them. And look, somebody put their guacamole or something here. Like, what the heck? So Bleeding Cool broke this morning that they're ending, DC Comics is actually ending their exclusive Walmart 100-page giant comics line. And the reason for that is that they're going to produce similar books everywhere. They're going to release 100-page giants everywhere at the same time, you know, as they cut back on the direct market. So it looks like DC is starting to realize that, like, you have to sell comics in other places. You can't rely on comic book shops to sell comic books, because the comic book shops are closing at a shocking rate, and you have to meet people where they're at. This is something we've talked about in the channel multiple times. We've had Peter Simeti from Alterna on here talking about there, where if you want to sell comics to the mainstream audience, to the masses, you really have to meet people where they're at. And frankly, other than the diehards, you know, the average middle America, they're not going to comic book shops. They're not going to seek out a comic book shop, and they're getting harder and harder to find because, unfortunately, they're going out of business. So this is really interesting to see that they make this announcement right after they announce that they're cutting back on their direct market titles. So coming from Rich Johnston, at Bleeding Cool. And again, you might not recognize Bleeding Cool without all the ads. I have to turn the ad blocker on Bleeding Cool. I normally don't like doing that, but Bleeding Cool has so many ads I can't even navigate the site, so I had to do that just to read this article. So over the last year, DC Comics has been publishing an exclusive line of 100-page giant comics through Walmart's first 4 a month and recently 6 a month. Okay, each features reprint material across DC's line, as well as brand new exclusive to Walmart stories by some of DC Comics' leading in-demand talent. And yeah, they're actually, we reviewed these. I think they're fantastic, and I think the price point is fantastic. And it's really hard to make a case for a $3.99 32-page comic in the direct market when for $1 more you get 100 pages. And the print quality is good. I thought it would be cheaper paper. It's not. They're actually very, very good. So a number of retailers have spoken against the exclusivity, though some have been content in the hope that this line will find new customers. It has also led to comic stores buying up all the copies at their local Walmarts and marking them up a little. Now, this is interesting. I can actually find these comics. A lot of people said they can't find them. And I think the reason I can find the comics is that where I live, most of the comic shops have gone out of business. In fact, the closest comic shop to us is like 45 minutes from here. We used to have one in town. We had one the next town over, but in the last few years, they've all gone out of business. So I think the reason that we can actually, part of the reason we can actually find the books is that maybe the comic shops, they've gone out of business and so nobody's buying them here except for us. So that's interesting. Some Walmart sell through the comics in seconds, it seems. Yeah. Some seem to knock the copies around on the shelves for months. Yeah. Our Walmart, they sit there. They collect dust. They've got months worth of them, all you can buy. It seems to have been a mixed bag of performance, depending on the location of the store, the attitude of the staff, and the hawkishness of local comic book stores. In response, Marvel Comics started providing Walmart with bag sets of already printed comics and exclusively reduced price. Exclusively reduced price. This is not new. This actually Ollie's has been selling these bags of bargain bin comics. A lot of the titles are Secret Empire and other titles that just pissed people off and they weren't buying them. So if you go to Ollie's bargain outlet, you can find all the bagged Marvel comics you want for like $4. You get like 8 books. It's ridiculous. So this is not exclusive to Walmart. They've also started selling 100-page exclusive comics to Target with the Primal Age line. And recently, DC Comics started creating original 100-page giant comics for the direct market with Superman 100-page Super Spectacular. But coming out of Comics Pro, that appears to have all changed. Retailer Ryan Higgins reports that the Walmart line is ending and replaced with 100-page specials available everywhere. 48 pages of new material with the rest being classic. So we're talking half the material now is going to be new. So you see what's going on here. I mean, it's not hard to see what's going on here. DC is trying to phase itself out of the direct market because I think DC realizes that the direct market is living on borrowed time. The comic shops are living on borrowed time. In fact, the comic shops that are still surviving are selling, lots of back issues and other pop culture stuff. The one comic shop that we have left in our area survives mostly on sports card and sports memorabilia and movie memorabilia. And yeah, they have a couple rows of comic books, but that's not their bread and butter. Another comic shop that we used to buy a lot of our books from recently said they're not selling new comics because they can't unload them. They're selling back issues, and that is it. So I think DC realizes that the direct market is dying. It's dying. So in other news, Dan DiDio clarifies that the 10 to 15% comic book store line cut has already been accomplished with current cuts of the line, Bleeding Cool previously noted, and the line cut was also alongside the all ages YA graphic novels and new 100 Giant series. I think there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot more cuts coming. I think what's going to happen is DC is going to try to push more into the mainstream. And again, these are things that critics of the comic book industry, including people in Comicsgate, have been saying for months, years, right? They've been saying that comics need to go outside the direct market, and they've actually been attacked for that. People like Peter Simeti said that comics need to expand outside of the direct market, and they've been attacked for taking those positions. And now DC is like, oh yeah, I guess we should do this after all, because look, the comic shops are dying. But the comics media is like, hey, everything's fine. It's all fine. Comics are not going anywhere. This tells me that they're worried. Internally, they're worried. They're cutting staff, they're cutting books, and they're going to try to push into other markets, which they should have done. Frankly, they should have done this 10 years ago. I mean, the writing's been on the wall for years, and why it's taken them so long to get around to it, I think they just assumed that the direct market was going to be there forever, but it's not going to be there forever. So, as a comic book creator, again, we talk about people doing independent comics and doing direct-to-consumer comics. I think direct-to-consumer comics are going to get bigger and bigger, and I think, especially if the direct market implodes, which I think we're looking at. We're looking at the direct market basically collapsing in real time. We don't see it yet. You're not going to see it until 5-10 years from now. You're going to be able to look back and go like, oh yeah, that's when the comic shops died. That's the year the comic shops died. And I think 2018, 2019 will be sort of recognized as the year that the comic book direct market died, or at least it started declining rapidly. So I think as an independent comic creator, you're going to have to find other avenues because, as comic publishers sort of downsize and refocus their efforts on a mainstream audience, I think there are going to be fewer opportunities for people to break into the comic book industry. I think you're going to have to make your own job. If you want to make comics, there certainly is a market out there for independent comics. I mean, we see people doing very, very well, crowdfunding books, or just, selling, even digital subscriptions, webcomics, all this stuff. We see people doing that now. They've been doing it for years. I mean, over a decade, 10, 15 years now, people have been successfully self-publishing, selling primarily direct-to-consumer, and sort of having this like comic book side hustle industry. And you're going to see more and more of this happen. You're going to see more and more established pros, I think, leave this industry and go kind of strike out and do their own thing, because I don't think they're going to have a choice. If you want to work in comics, you're going to have to find a smarter, better way to do it, because the comic book industry is changing. I think it's shrinking. I think the job opportunities are going to shrink. So now is probably as good of a time as ever to look at doing independent comics, to get in the habit of doing your own thing, because I think you're going to have to if you want to survive, if you want to make comic books going forward, for the most part. And if these jobs from DC or Marvel pop up, that's fantastic. But you can't depend on these companies to be around forever, for the industry to be in the condition it has been in. I mean, the jobs are they're just not sustainable. It's not sustainable to have a career, for most people, to have a career in comic books right now. It's a very kind of a flaky industry right now, and the money is not great. And even the people who are at the top of the food chain, a lot of them are jumping ship. They're going to video games or movies or something else that pays better, because it's not a secure industry. But you can build an audience online, and you can monetize that audience. You can sell books directly to them, and there are people who have been doing it for a long time and continue to do it because there is a demand for it. It's just that these big companies, they need the margins. They need lots of money rolling in, and it's easier, I think, if you're just a small operation to put your books out than if you're answering to a corporation like Time Warner or Disney, and you have to make the money. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap this one up. This is very interesting to watch, but I think we're watching the direct market just die in real time, and DC realizes this, and they're gonna start. I think they're gonna start pushing more and more original content to the mainstream audiences. And hopefully they get better display, because it is really hard to find these books, even the stores that carry them, because they're in a little tiny box and they're usually tucked away in the corner. We need to bring spinner racks back. That's the goal. Bring back the spinner racks, DC, so people can actually find these books. All right, please subscribe to Clownfish TV for more pop culture news, views, rants, gaming videos, art videos, and more. This has been Neon. I'll talk to you later. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.